Hi, yay! All right, welcome everyone to our 7th annual Christmas holiday reading here for the middle writers. This is a group we do on Thursday nights from 6:30 to 8. Every Thursday. We're off till January 11th, but please feel free to come in at any time. Today we have our writers doing their readings from 2:30 to 3:30, 3:15, and we'll have pizza in the back for afterwards. And then at 3:30 we're having Lammy Muttonson and the Baby Jesus, which is our dramatic performance today, and hope you all enjoy it. All right, without further ado, our first reader, Mark.
Well, hello everyone. Hi everybody. I'm sorry if I was a little out of sorts there. I was wearing my reading glasses, which are not good for walking or seeing anything further away than that is at reading level. So I figured I would share with you a little do's and don'ts list, since being the holiday time, and a little do's and don'ts list for the most wonderful time of the year. Do reflect on the passage of time, the shortest day, longest night, how quickly 12 leaves of a calendar are ripped off. Reflection of this kind can lead to new ways of relating to your own life, a life in context. Don't talk constantly about all the things you never got as a kid, especially about that emerald and gold Schwinn with the streamers that looks so keen in the plate glass picture window at Jordan Marsh downtown. The one you never got because A, you couldn't ride it anyway, B, your mother never could afford to shop there, and C, in 1978, you couldn't ride a girl's bike even if you knew how to ride one in the first place. Do make it time for yourself and give yourself the best gift first. Don't make everyone promise not to say anything offensive about anything at all over dinner or in the car on the way to Mamaroneck for the 7th year in a row, and why the hell can't they drive down to Taconic for once and stay with us for a change? Then again, that might be worse. Do go out of your way to help a stranger. Don't make such a production of your piety, generosity, goodwill, and overall righteousness that even the needy stranger doesn't care to know you any better, mainly because you don't seem to know yourself that well. Do learn something about Yuletide traditions from other parts of the world. For example, because Germans are essentially crazy, many take delight in telling children wild tales of a child-stealing and eating demon that only shows up around Christmas. Don't follow the odious example of that man in Washington and go out of your way to force everyone you meet to conform to your senses of faith, fealty, and or loyalty to our, quote, traditional values, as if saying happy holidays is tantamount to saying hail Satan. Do your level best to keep from wanting the non-essential. Somehow, those desires burn hotter and are more bitter in memory than they need to be. Don't start that crap again about being allergic to green bean casserole. You know for a fact you eat them fried. So it's just an affectation you pull out every November 15th and practice until Christmas just to burn your Aunt Lucille's biscuits. And do give away something you really, really value. And before you give it away, think about why you treasured it in the first place. Was it because you inherited it, or did you buy it with your own money? Is the meaning all in your head and none in the heart? And after all you're thinking, give it away anyway. And last, do eat more than you should, drink if you drink, as much as you need, but let the designated driver take you home. And take it easy on the wassail. No one actually knows what's in that. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas and Merry Christmas, and thank you for that. That's beautiful. Our next presenter, next reader, Janet Tava.
Okay. There's a reason why I wrote this. Besides World AIDS Day being Friday, Harold said to me one day on the way out of class, you know, when I got to Manhattan, there were no gay men as my mentors. There were none left. And I got to thinking, I lived through that time. I lost my own mentor that way. And I lost him during the Christmas season, so I wanted to write about it. And Daniel said to me, when he got here, there wasn't a whole bunch of people to mentor him. And he asked me questions of what it was like, so I thought I would write it down. And if I get emotional, just go with it. I walked into the tiny funeral parlor, deep in the village, dressed as if I was in a vintage Fellini movie. All fur, with a black pencil skirt and a black turtleneck sweater, and of course, black high heels. I wore my mink coat like a security blanket tightly pulled around me. Dark glasses staged on my face, lips colored red with Fire and Ice by Revlon. Bill deserved this send-off. In fact, he ordered it. This man made my career. He was one of the best-looking men I ever laid eyes on. I was 22 when I first met him. He was 27 years older. He was Scottish, and he was charming, and he was gay. I was way, way out of my league. I was a naive girl from New Jersey, about to be taking on such a ride for 10 years. What it was like on West 17th Street in the 1980s, what a time to be in New York, what a time to be in the arts, what a time. The close friendship between Bill Skilling and myself lasted 10 years until he died from AIDS. AIDS was known as GRID back then, gay-related immune deficiency. It killed him in less than a year. When I think back to the last few months before Bill died, I realized he was preparing me for life in the arts without him. He would instruct me who to work for, who to not work for, what projects to take, how to conduct myself at all times, how to dress, how to charge, and how to get paid. Information that is invaluable to an artist. When I went to visit him in St. Vincent's, his door had an X above it to identify his disease. The nurses handed me rubber gloves and a mask to put on before I was allowed to enter. Damn those rubber gloves. Damn it. I always took them off the minute the nurses left the room. Human touch is something every dying person deserves. I thought to myself, did these nurses actually think just by holding Bill's hand I was going to get AIDS? I would take his frail hands and hold them as I listened to anything he wanted to talk about. His skin was so thin, like ancient parchment paper, and it was about to disintegrate. He would wince at the slightest touch. I leaned in closely to hear him. His voice was reduced from a booming bass baritone to a slice of a whisper. The smell of the stale urine was pulsating in my head. I could see how the tiniest effort exhausted him. He would start on a thought and stop in mid-sentence. I would patiently wait until he picked up the thought again. Whatever he wanted to talk about was okay with me, be it Andalusia or the Ramrod Club or Studio 54. It was hard to watch the end of a brilliant life. I can still feel the immense grief that came over me as I sat and tried to comfort him. I was about to lose one of the most important men in my life. In fact, I lost my father within 10 days. That was the year that life slapped me in the face. As I held Bill's hands, I closed my eyes and remembered the first time I met him. It was at the infamous Carl Mann Studios, the same one where Warhol and Peter Max worked. Bill had a black skin-tight, short-sleeved t-shirt with skin-tight jeans with boots. It was the unofficial uniform of Christopher Street in the West Village. In the late 70s, early 80s, being gay meant being part of the underground society. There was a certain look. It was the era of the village people, and I was standing in front of Freddie Mercury of the art world. I knew at that time my life was about to change. I was just a girl with some talent that was about to be taken on a ride that would last 10 years. And in that time, AIDS had ravaged the art world as it claimed the most promising of our minds. And now, I was sitting in St. Vincent's, ground zero to AIDS in New York City, reflecting back on a friendship between myself and the gay men who saw something in me, something I did not even see. I sat looking at my friend, knowing this would be the very last time I saw him. I was ready to let go. He was so frail and in so much pain. Wherever his soul took him, it would be better than the suffering he was enduring now. I had to say goodbye. I just kept thinking in the 80s there wasn't a lot of money for AIDS. Families shunned their own. The hospitals were filled with young gay men who died alone. Most funeral parlors would not accept the bodies for burials. Most bodies were never claimed. Most families never even knew their sons died. I kept thinking, how did we get here? How did society turn its back on a whole population of people? It took thousands to die before money was raised for research, before the average Joe felt connected to the problem. I think about all the artists, writers, actors, singers, dancers, designers who never got to finish their work. All the plays not written, all the dances not choreographed, all the paintings not painted, all the plays not written, all the new movies never made, and all the songs never sung. AIDS left a huge gap in the following decades. The art world flattened and desecrated by a disease that stole its stars. That last day in the hospital room, Bill's roommate, Lou, handed me all the reference journals and magazines that Bill had gathered for me before he died. I took the heavy pile and somehow made it back to New Jersey. I put them on my bookshelf and never had the heart to read the notes he left me. I worried if I was up to the task to carry on a bright career such as his. All these years later, his voice still whispers in my ear on a job site, what to do or what not to do. Every time I want to yell at a client, Bill's shadow gently tugs at my shoulder. He pulls me back to a dignified place. In the 10 years I worked side by side with him, I never saw this man act in a defensive manner. I never saw him lose his cool. When I asked how he remained in control, he would say, acting out is not an option, darling. That and a cheap bottle of perfume will get you nowhere. All the diaries and notes went untouched for 3 decades. It was not until we were moving that I came across the books and magazines Bill left for me. The first one I reached for was an art book on monkeys. This was one of Bill's favorite books. There was a yellow sticky note peeking out of one of the pages. The sticky note was torn and creased and discolored. I could almost smell his Yves Saint Laurent opium on it. I could hear Bill's voice say, pay close attention to the monkeys on the Boucher paintings on page 49. They are lovely and right for the market. Monkey motifs are making a big comeback. I broke into a loud laughter, partly to release the stress of seeing his handwriting all these years, and partly because he was telling me monkeys are making a comeback. I thought to myself, there has to be a deeper meaning. Monkeys are all the rage. And then I realized in code it meant pay close attention to 19th century ornamentalia and classical designs. They are an important trend. I picked up a well-worn British edition of World of Interiors magazine. I found my second sticky note. This one said, look closely at the red and purple drapes. Delightful. Unexpected combinations are never dated. Try the unexpected. Never fall back on safe designs. I sat on the floor with Bill's ghost, flipping through magazines and books, relearning my craft. I came across a journal. Inside he wrote, "Everyone deserves to live with beauty. It is human. Give your clients something beautiful and they will always come back." I could feel his spirit sitting there with me, whispering all his secrets. In Bill's last months, he passed on as much knowledge to me as he could. It was a crash course in everything he knew about the art world, a world that selects so few. I looked down at the book of monkeys and smiled to myself. I could hear his strong voice explaining to me that monkeys were the most important decorative element of the year. I know that Christmas that Bill passed, he left me a very important present wrapped in sticky notes. When I wanted to remember him, I go to the Frick Museum and I find the Boucher room. It is one of the most beautifully painted rooms in Manhattan. Some of the best gifts are not always with a bow. Sometimes it is the wisdom and genius that a friend or mentor passes on. Grazie, dormi bene, dolce, William, which means thank you, sleep well, sweet William. Just one really funny thing. I was in Hudson yesterday with my husband, and there was the Book of Monkeys sitting next to the World Interiors magazine in a store from the 80s, which, if that wasn't divine order, I don't know what was. Our esteemed editor.
Hi, I'm Carol, and I just wanted to mention that Harold and I, as part of the creative writing program, do a literary magazine once a year. The theme for this coming year is Complete the Dream, Finish, and Start. So if any of you are interested in contributing a written piece or art, I have flyers to give you with information on how to submit your work. And this is about my first airplane ride. No one had told me what my first airplane ride would be like, just not to be afraid. I wasn't. I was jiggling in my seat with anticipation. I expected to ascend through a tear in the clouds straight into heaven or outer space, or both. I thought I would be able to look down and see the whole United States, with each state outlined in puzzle-like clarity, the Michigan mitten that was my home, mountains laid out for me in multicolored topographical relief. Well, I was only 6 years old. What I saw instead, through the pristine sealed plane window with its many layers of glass, was a disconcertingly drab checkerboard, an inchoate tapestry of patches of scrubby earth. For the first time, I contemplated death. All those fluffy white clouds and profound blue made me think of the afterlife and brought to mind the pictures of saints in my mother's prayer book that I looked at when I got bored at Sunday Mass. Color plates of Marias and Peters in monochromatic pinks or greens, standing on clouds and gazing upward at some unseen destiny. Is this a picture of heaven? Is this what heaven looks like? I would ask my mother persistently. She had no answer for me. There were no pale saints in the air over Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee, Georgia, or Florida, our destination, just nebulous balls of mist that at times engulfed the plane and glaringly reflected the sun. Within the hissing, compartmentalized atmosphere of the plane, my mother, father, brother Paul, and I ate breakfast served on miniature plates with futuristic-looking silverware. The sun beating through the window was warm and contrasted with the draft near the floor that kept my feet constantly cold as we sped from the heart of Midwestern winter toward instant summer. When we arrived at the airport and emerged through the sliding glass doors, I felt reborn and baptized by the fresh, moist wind that seemed to blow straight from Cuba. The car trip through Miami was hot. In our air-conditioned rented Lincoln Continental, we glided silently through the steamy streets of a barrio. Bilingual signs clicked their tongues at us in yellow and red letters, making the day seem to sizzle. Benches, drugstore signs, and billboards talked to us a mile a minute in shrill Spanglish. Everything seemed to be rusting off its hinges in this town, the dregs of both cultures corroding and hashing together like dog food. I rolled down the window and caught a whiff of something that smelled like frying hamburger. The way thoughts and smells often came together was strange, I thought, as I pondered the mysteries of the wrinkled, dark old men who were walking everywhere. "We're almost there," my mother sang out as we glided down the two-lane highway that cut through the Florida plain. Paul and I gazed out our separate windows at the dusty vegetation, the bleached sky. We stayed overnight in one of those by-the-highway chain motels. The next day we set out for the Keys, where my grandparents had been wintering. About 2 hours, we arrived at our destination, Key Colony Beach near Marathon Key, one of the larger islands. We checked into a motel that was on the beach facing the ocean. Mom opened all the windows to the soft sound of the waves, and we immediately all fell asleep. Granny and Grandpa had their own accommodations near us at a boatel, so called because it was a cute motel with a dock attached for their boat, which they could step onto directly from their room. There was a large kitchen where Granny prepared delicious dinners with fresh fish that Grandpa had caught that same day. Our motel had a small pool where Paul and I spent most of the day. There I made a friend, Mary, and one day Mom and Dad drove us to a tourist attraction that promised we could swim with the dolphins. Mary and I got into a small boat that followed the swimming dolphins across a secluded pond. We were told to grab a tail, and to our amazement and delight, we were pulled by one of the friendly fish. I also discovered Southern food, hush puppies, grits, and peanut brittle from Stuckey's, a chain of general stores that sold everything from beach buckets to cheap Hawaiian shirts. I decided I love this part of America, where the cheerful waitresses at the diners or Howard Johnson's would call everyone yous or you all. After a week of sun and sand and exotic souvenirs, conch shells we could use to listen to the ocean by holding them against our ears, a ship in a bottle, hippie costume rings, a tiny bottle of orange blossom perfume, we found ourselves back at the Miami airport. Flying back home in the late afternoon, I watched first earth and then sky eventually become swallowed up by darkness. But before dusk fell, now that I was no longer disoriented by the altitude, I was able to notice details. Highways with their tiny beetle-like cars, the coastline with waves crawling in slow motion, compounds of airport buildings, factories, stadiums. On our northward path, we veered alternately west and east, and the sun wheeled around the cabin, throwing sharp shadows. There would be many more plane rides after that, as each year Mom and Dad took us out of school a few days before our winter break. Thus began my love affair with America from the air. So our next reader is the very talented Daniel.
Good afternoon. Here, I'm taller than everyone else, so, or not everyone, but. The sun slips through the bare ridgeline trees that claw at the sky, and the house groans as though trying to curl in on itself to escape the cold. In the fireplace, the solstice log crackles, and I wonder for a moment if the house is groaning toward the heat, not just away from the cold. Lucas presses against me on the sofa, and I can hear Anne in the kitchen, making coffee from the sound of it. "You guys want a cup?" she yells. "After dinner," I yell back. "I'm pacing myself." Lucas declines the offer too, but reminds her to ask Sid when he comes back in from retrieving a load of wood. "He should have done that before the sun set," Lucas mutters to me. His phone said it was almost an hour more, and he forgot to consider what time it sets if you're down in a valley, I say. There's always some variable that Sid reasonably forgets, but at a certain point, you have to wonder about the law of averages. He's the one getting cold, so I don't know why you care. I care because I'm bored, and the sun won't be back up for almost 15 hours, and grumbling gives me something to do. There are worse things to be than bored, I counter. Especially in this house, Anne says from the door to the hallway, and I jump a little, not having heard her return. Like? Lucas asks. Like what happened to the Color family. Don't listen to her, I tell Lucas. She thinks because she booked the Airbnb, she knows something. I know something because I Googled before I put down the deposit. Sid comes in with a bang, the wind blowing the door in and against the wall. Googled what? He asks as he gets the door under control with one foot. He crosses to the hearth and dumps an armlet of wood onto the small pile already there. Anne is just trying to scare us with dark stories of the North, I say. I'm trying to tell you a little history of this place, Anne says. That history just happens to be a little dark. So what happened? Sid asks. There are details no one knows, but that's bound to happen when the only survivor is a 6-year-old. Fuck off, says Lucas. I'm not in the mood for ghost stories. There aren't any ghosts in this story. In the house, maybe, but not in the story. Lucas again tells her to fuck off, but Sid and I both tell her to go on, so majority rules. Anne looks like she would tell the rest of the story even if no one sided with her. It happened in '74, December 21st. The family were good Christians, of course, and probably barely noticed it was solstice night. They sat down to dinner and said grace. Edie, the girl who survived, gave those details. It was her father and mother, Edie, and her 4 siblings. But Edie's is the only name I remember, so call the rest 1 through 4. All 7 of them were about to dig into dinner when there was a single, booming knock at the front door. Of course there was, Lucas says. Do you want me to tell this or not? Anne shoots back. No, I thought that was clear. This is my favorite night of the year. This is as long as the nights get. Everything is better from this day onward, and you can't say that very often. I'm still telling the story, Anne says. A couple of kids went to answer the door, and no one was there. Then they heard a sound from the living room, this room, a whoomp. And those who were still at the dinner table met those who went to answer the door as they came running to see what had happened. There was a fire in the fireplace before, but after the whoomp, there was just a bunch of half-melted snow and a bit of smoke. The front door creaked open and then slammed shut again, and Edie said there was a sound like a laugh made out of breaking glass. Edie was only 6, so who knows what that meant. I'm out, Lucas says. I'm making coffee. Who wants a cup? Anne just made a pot, I remind him. I'm sure there's still some left. I want a fresh pot. Suit yourself. It isn't really about the coffee. That boy has a cute ass, but he can't handle a scary story. After Lucas leaves, Anne asks, where was I? A laugh made of breaking glass, Sid reminds her. Right, now cut it with the interruptions. So the little girl heard a laugh, everyone did, and the oldest brother, call him number 1, ran out to find out what made the sound. There should have been another sound then, something to say, this boy is lost and you'll never see him again. But there wasn't. There wasn't even a breaking glass laugh. The father yelled from the living room after a minute, you find anything? But there was no reply. After another minute, number 1, I asked you a question. Still no response. So the father grumbled, poked the mess in the fireplace once more, and went off to see where the boy was. This time, when he was out of sight, there was the laughter again. But this time it sounded like 2 laughs, 2 breaking windows. And then thud, from directly above them, from the bedroom you have, Sid. The mother shrieked. Maybe one of the kids shrieked too. Now, number 2, who might not have been the eldest child, but who had his man size, now number 2 said it was his job to go see what that was and find his brother and father along the way. Stay here, said his mother, but he insisted it was his responsibility. Then take the poker from the fireplace, she said, and that was the compromise they settled on. He took the poker and left the room, but not running like his brother had. Edie said it was the first time she had ever seen him scared. It wasn't just a silent disappearance this time. After a moment, they heard a crashing, and I'm guessing that was the poker hitting the wall. When the police came, they found a hole in the hallway wall where it looked like it had been hit. But after the crash, nothing except laughter. Lots of it now. Number 2, the mother screamed, but obviously he didn't shout back. He was gone. They sat then for a few minutes. Edie said they hardly even talked, just sat in the living room as it grew colder since the fire had gone out or been put out. Edie clung to her mother while her two older brothers sat across from her. "I'm calling the police," the mother said. "I don't know why I didn't do that earlier." She picked up the phone, but I'll give you one guess if there was a dial tone, because of course there wasn't. The lines were still above ground then, so maybe the wind had just blown them down. But I don't think that's what happened. The mother didn't think that was what had happened either. Edie said her mother said more things than that, but Edie wasn't allowed to say those words. Okay, "I can't leave Edie by herself," the mother said when she had recovered her composure, "but no more going off alone. 3 and 4, go. Find your father, find your brothers, don't split up, don't leave the house, don't even go upstairs. Just look in each room down here and then come back to the living room. Don't split up." And now it was just the mother and her youngest child sitting together in the living room, which was growing even colder. For a minute, nothing happened. Then 3 yelled, "No one is in the kitchen." Another minute passed, and 4 shouted, "3, look!" And his voice cut off. Now the laughter was coming from everywhere, from a million bazillion places, Edie said, and it didn't stop. Instead, it grew louder, and glittery things started to fall down the chimney, landing in the ruins of the fire. Edie said her mother started to scream then, and like the laughter, the screaming didn't stop. It was scary, Edie said, and she wanted to cry, but she also wanted to see the glittery things still falling from the chimney. She tried to climb down from the sofa, but her mother stopped screaming long enough to shout, "No!" and pull Edie back into her arms. "I want to see," Edie cried, but her mother was finished letting people go. There was another thud from above, a little quieter than the one before, but then another and another, until child and mother both realized it was footsteps, the footsteps of someone walking toward the door from the bedroom to the upstairs hallway. More footsteps from the hall. Then they started down the steps, slowly, but each one a distinct thud. And the mother whimpered and held Edie so tightly she struggled to breathe. More thudding steps down the hall outside the living room, and then 2 long, curving horns seemed to grow from the side of the doorway near the ceiling. The horns were followed by a hairless scalp and then a man's face, or maybe I should say a male face, with white skin and eyes that glowed blue. "Well," he rumbled with a voice that sounded like snow falling from eaves, and the mother lapsed into quiet crying. Edie knew her mother was scared, and she thought she should be scared too, but the glittery things in the fireplace were so pretty, and couldn't this great tall man be Santa? It was nearly Christmas, and he didn't look like she had imagined. But when you're 6 years old, I think you get used to things not looking quite how you had imagined them. Shh. He shushed in his snowy voice, and the mother grew still. "Come," he said to Edie, and she slid from her mother's grasp and began to cross the room toward the Santa who nearly filled the doorway, his horns disappearing above the lintel. "Edie!" the mother screamed, and Edie spun around, but her mother was gone. Edie started to cry a little then, but the glittery things in the fireplace started to fly up from where they had been laying. Edie saw they were fairies, and they were probably fairies like the thing in the door was Santa. More of the fairies crawled up over his shoulder, and others crawled around his legs, and then they too took flight, filling the air in the living room. From them came the breaking glass laughter. They began to land on her head and do something with her hair. I found a picture of Edie from the police station, and her hair was more elaborate than any braid, woven into the form of a crown decorated with things that looked like weirdly shimmering oak leaves. Then Edie went to her father's chair and sat. She said she didn't move again until the police arrived 4 days later. The horned man whispered stories to her all through the night and all through the next day until the sun set again. But she wouldn't tell anyone what the stories were. Their secret is all she would say. When the family missed both Christmas Eve and Christmas Day services at the church, someone got concerned and tried to call the house. Getting no answer, they called the police, who came to investigate and found Edie alone in the cold, still sitting in her father's chair. They didn't find any clues to what had happened, just the hole in the hallway wall. No one really believed Edie's story, of course, but neither did anyone have a solid explanation. Edie went to live with her father's sister, and 7 years later, on December 21st, the rest of the family were declared dead. Edie herself 13 years old now, had lunch with her aunt the next day, and then must have slipped out of the house. No one ever saw her again. And that's what happened to the Culler family. "Fuck," says Sid, and I have nothing to add. "Is it over yet?" Lucas yells from the kitchen. And before anyone can answer, there is a heavy knock on the front door. No one moves. After a heartbeat, there is a thump from the fireplace, and the fire Sid had so carefully maintained is replaced with snow. We all hear the laughter then. It really does sound like it's made of breaking glass. Thank you, and now Michelle.
Hey. This is set in a small town in the South. I picked Macon, Georgia. You can pick your own small town. The name of this is Strings. Strings attached to shreds of more strings hung from Grandma's closet door for as long as Sandy could remember. Growing up in the old clapboard house with the backyard that went on for days, Sandy would run as far as she could in that backyard and never saw the end. Sandy would pack a lunch of fried chicken Grandma had just cooked with some biscuits and a big slice of sweet potato pie, carefully wrapped the whole lot in an old loincloth that Grandma said belonged to Grandpa, and placed the bundle in a paper sack, folded with care so as not to crack the crispy chicken nor smash the warm pie. She would then untie Smokey, the old black shepherd, tied to the back porch and depart on a camping trip, a journey into the Netherlands of the backyard, the outpost, if you will. Most times she would slide under the back porch and get the red radio flyers she got for Christmas because Smokey would get tired and slow him down, and Sandy had to be back before dark. Returning home more often than not, Mama Nana would be listening to Billie Holiday. Such a mournful sound to Sandy's young ear, but the saddest song had to be Strange Fruit. Sandy, after tying Smokey to his appointed station with braided string, would rush to her room and sort through her booty of different shaped rocks, sound sticks, and pretty leaves. On occasion, she would gather enough pecans for Mama Nana to make a pie. Whatever she gathered, there would always be something special for her grandmother, which she would place on the wooden hope chest at the foot of the four-poster bed, never failing to glance at the strung strands that were hung on a hook on the closet door which faced Mama Nana's bed. Well, Sandy grew up and Mama Nana died, as did Smokey the dog. While preparing the house for sale, Sandy came across an old Bible in the hope chest that was bound in a thick leather belt. Upon opening same and briefly reading 3 folded pages, Sandy learned the answer to some major questions from her childhood. The land extended 3.5 miles back, which Mama Nana purchased, to an old sturdy pecan tree from which Grandpa was hung and burned. All that remained by the time Mama Nana arrived were shreds of string. Now, we would like to welcome our star, Ashok.
Okay, so it's Ashok. All right. Thank you. All right. So this is from my next book. Let's see. I too have been covered with thorns. I am called Karuna, which means compassion. I am the boy who has tried to live up to the name. So I would heal her. She had been harmed, for her grandfather had touched her from the ages of 2 to 9, and her subway train was late. How many sorrows. I too have been covered with thorns. I would heal him too. He had scorched himself, self-immolating, and did not get his wish. No, he survived. Disfigured, yes, but he was gorgeous to me. Still, my beloved was leaving me for good, feeling he had no love to offer, as he had made no more smiles or even eyes to watch me. I had heard about victims who murdered themselves, but this was just not right. He had lived through this, knowing that I would sell my soul for him. And though the other one, the girl with the brown skin, was my beloved as well, and was the spirit of love, she was leaving me too. She had never tried to hurt herself, but was now hurting me. I would miss them too much. To love both was to run in a blizzard past the flower garden, without shoes or shawl to nourish me, to protect me with heat. The collapse was fresh. I wanted to make them smile, to laugh, to fight the sorrow I knew would never, ever be a stranger. You see, the problem was simple. A Karuna without complication was a Karuna without custody of himself. A Karuna with simplicity was a Karuna under the desert, with the mirage far above. I had been cut to the quick with some kind of abandon, with a fierce whirling and twirling, and I was drowning. I was told I offered nothing. I was told to move back, to retreat politely. It was certain that I would now watch the cripple dance. I would now watch the cripple dance, but never feel the rhythm and never hear the music. Like the warmth blooming in March, killing the cold of February, I would aim to have the sun French kiss my face. It would never work, though. For you see, like the roses themselves, I too have been covered with thorns, but I would always lead into the shade. Even now, as the autumn has left me, even now, as Christmas has arrived. I don't know who's next. Who's next? Oh, okay. Gina is next. Yay, Gina.
Okay, I'm going to be quick. I heard we're running out of time. I'm deviating from my normal stuff. Maybe I need a break, but I need Mark to really read this, but I'm not going to ask him. So bear with me, and hopefully you guys can go on a journey with me. I don't know if I'm effective, but we'll see. All right. The engine whirls like a white noise, endless and steady, unwavering. Lying on the back seat, feet up at the window, the night sky flying by like images on a screen, too fleeting to be captured. Eyes are heavy, then close. Time stands still and memories fade. No clocks, no sounds, emptiness. Turn signals, click, 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 click. Car turns, then slows, stops. Steel doors open and slam shut. Air is thick, both warm and cool, salty breeze. Step out to feel pavement underfoot, then the smooth, gentle, decaying wood of the boardwalk. Ocean sparkles diamonds as a muted tangerine sun reflects against the waves, violently rushing back and forth, taking with it both sand and feet, foam like silk. Thick, salty air seems to breeze through one ear and out of the other, gently erasing every restless thought. No world beyond this moment, only the sound of waves crashing back and forth, back and forth. Smokey Robinson in the distance, back on the boardwalk. Screen door opens and Rusty Springs squeal as it fights to awkwardly close behind. Soft Berber carpet rises underfoot. Smell of shrimp and lime, the whirl of the blender, crackling with the hush puppies in the hot oil of the cast iron skillet. Jimmy Buffett plays everywhere now. Icy slush of lime daiquiri fills the air and greets my lips. Tangy sweetness. Windows open to the sound and smell of the fresh and humid sea air. Slight remnants of gritty sand fills the senses. In the evening, sticky, stiff sheets cover, but not unpleasant. Smell of old, slight decay. Sleep overtakes like a heavy blanket, lulling into its warm embrace. Sound, oceans, waves, sleep. That's it.
Yay! Thank you, everybody. All right. It's my turn to read, but I'm actually doing a show. So right now, I ask you all, if there's pizza in the back for you, if you'd like a slice of pizza, while the actors come in and get the stage ready for the show. And thank you all for coming. Yay!